In the wake of reactions to the EndSARS White Report and the comments on the rule of law in Nigeria, tonight we speak with the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Abubakar Malami. And President Muhammadu Buhari and his South African counterpart have met in Abuja today in a relationship they hope can be better improved. Hello everyone, welcome to Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimbale at Channels Television in Abuja. President Muhammadu Buhari today received President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, at the State House in Abuja. The South African president, who is accompanied by a delegation of ministers and business leaders, is on a state visit expected to reinforce South Africa's bilateral relations with Nigeria, as well as strengthen partnerships directed at African development and cooperation in multilateral forums. He also spoke about the issues of health, COVID-19, and of course, Nigerians living in South Africa. Take a listen to both presidents after their meetings.
Despite the scare generated by the new coronavirus variant, we have been able to hold successful meetings while observing strict coronavirus protocols through fraternal cooperation and understanding. Today has witnessed the signing of new memoranda of understanding between Nigeria and South Africa in diverse areas, including youth development, women and child empowerment, and political consultations, critical areas that will lead to increased people-to-people contact. Existing memorandums of understanding signed during previous binational commission meetings were also reviewed. These include memorandums of understanding on military cooperation, power, cooperation in the field of geology, mining, and mineral processing, oil and gas, and several others. Today, we also jointly launched the Nigeria-South Africa Youth Dialogue, another veritable tool for interaction among our youth with the aim of creating shared values and aspirations.
As African countries, we are standing united against the imposition of arbitrary and discriminatory restrictions that are not only unscientific, but counterproductive in the long run. Indeed, the leaders of Côte d'Ivoire, where we are traveling to later today, as well as the leaders of Ghana and Senegal, have also expressed their dissatisfaction with the travel ban against South Africa and our sister countries in Southern Africa. This is a global pandemic, and overcoming it requires that we collaborate and work together as a collective. The resulting damage to this travel ban to the economies of the countries affected will be considerable and long-lasting. So I want to use this opportunity to once again call on the countries who have imposed this ban to reverse their decisions, whether they are in the northern, more developed economies or in other parts of our continent and elsewhere.
That's the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. President Muhammadu Buhari also spoke earlier. There are more stories for you on our political roundup, and when we come back, we'll delve into your major national stories. Stay with us and take a edition on this political roundup.
The federal government has commissioned a skill acquisition center to encourage entrepreneurship skill, reduce unemployment and self-reliance among youth corps members in Ogun State. Commissioning the center at the National Youth Service Corps Permanent Orientation Camp, Shagamu, Ogun State, the Director General of the NYSC, Shuaib Ibrahim, and a Senior Special Assistant to President Buhari on Millennium Development Goals, Adejoke Adefulire, said this is part of the strategic plans to reduce youth unemployment and poverty among the teeming youths in the country.
Our youth must be engaged. They must be encouraged to use their hands to work for a living and to shun all forms of crimes.
The House of Representatives is asking the Inspector General of Police to ensure the removal of illegal checkpoints across the country. The resolution of the House is sequel to an urgent motion by Representative Ifeanyi Moma calling for the investigation of loss of lives along the Onitsha-Owerri Expressway. The lawmakers says 20 people died after a trailer lost control at one of the checkpoints located in the middle of the road, which is the busiest in the area.
The House should mandate the Inspector General of Police to ensure the removal of illegal checkpoints across the country.
The All Progressives Congress ward in Ofu local government area of Kogi State has disowned Prince Mona Audu as a member of the party for failing to revalidate his membership during the APC nationwide registration and revalidation exercise conducted in 2021. At a press conference held at the party secretariat in Lokoja, the Kogi State capital, the chairman, APC, Onitsha Ward, Peter Onoja, while addressing journalists, stated that Mona Audu's membership of the party has since elapsed, as his name and other details about him had been struck out from the register of the party at the ward of Ofu Local Government Council.
The past few days have seen tremendous debates on major national issues. Just yesterday, the Lagos State government released a white paper on the EndSARS report. But in its white paper, the Lagos State government maintained that there was no massacre at the toll gate in Lagos and Lekki and denied orchestrating a cover-up. 11 out of the 32 recommendations made by the panel have been accepted. 6 others were accepted but with modifications, while 1 was rejected. The document also says that 14 of the recommendations fall outside the powers of the state and will consequently be forwarded to the federal government for consideration. The federal government obviously has its own share of the responsibility on this matter, which became a very, very naughty issue across the country. The outrage that we saw across the country also was a major issue. And tonight, we shall be speaking with the Attorney General of the Federation and the Minister of Justice, Mr. Abubakar Malami, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you, Shehu.
I guess it's a good place for us to begin tonight on the issue of the EndSARS report. First and foremost, let me get clarification because there's been debate between senior lawyers in the land when Mr. Keyamo said that Lagos, the panel in Lagos does not have powers to investigate or make inquiries on the police and the army. What's your position in that regard?
Well, it all depends on the perspectives from which you look at it with particular regard to the prevailing laws that are in context. When you talk of laws that are exclusively applicable to the Federation, and indeed the context from which they are viewed in terms of the factual situation, it is not out of place to arrive at a conclusion. So what conclusion you make out of it is a function of the factual situation and the applicable law. So what I'm saying in essence is not about a general statement, but it is about the factual situation, factual circumstances, and the applicable laws that have been viewed in context of applicability and enforceability.
From your own point of view, you think the panel in Lagos or in any other part of the country as it is or as it were, they have the right to be able to investigate the police and the army?
Investigation in its own right is all inclusive, and you can, your limits are only perhaps the context of the applicable law and the facts. That is what I am trying to say in essence. So you cannot, for example, outrule the possibility of an investigation with particular regard to the personalities or institution involved. For example, if the allegation is an allegation about the breach or infraction of a state law by a police officer or indeed by a military, it goes to reason that you cannot outrule the possibility of investigation, taking into consideration the fundamental undertone is the fact that the applicable and operational law in context is the law applicable in the state. But if what is in context is indeed a federal law over which a state does not have powers and jurisdiction, it accords to common sense and the law that it is only indeed a federal establishment that can conduct wholehearted investigation. So if what is in context is the violation of a law applicable in the state, and then a breach is being viewed for the purpose of ascertaining liability, prosecution, or otherwise, then certainly it is within the powers of the state to investigate. But where indeed what matters is not a state law, but a federal law, and in respect of which the state has no powers or jurisdiction to kind of exercise discretion one way or the other, then it calls to reason that the state cannot look into it.
So let's look at a white paper. What is your view on the report of the EndSARS?
Well, as you rightly say, the EndSARS in its own right has indeed generated a lot of controversy and has, is indeed a very naughty issue. But one thing that I think is important for the purpose of consideration is the fact that along the line, there were a lot of hate speeches associated with it, fake news associated with it, inclusive of perhaps imposition of drama scenes as being indeed scenes that were operational or perhaps applicable to EndSARS. So with that in mind, the true position of things is the fact that there is need for comprehensive investigation, and it is on account of that that Lagos State government, among others, put in place an inquiry which has eventually resulted in what we had at the report of the commission. But arising from that, I think one key important thing for consideration is it constitutes indeed a controversial issue. It has generated a lot of controversies, a lot of disputes, and you cannot outrule whatever possibilities, inclusive of the possibilities of fake news associated with it, possibilities of hate speeches associated with it, possibilities of imposition of, in fact, even drama scenes for the purpose of establishing a point. It all depends on the perspectives from which you look at it. But then the fact remains that within the context of the inquiry that has been put in place, you may as well be able to make some conclusions as to the authenticity or otherwise of certain allegations, of certain facts that were put across for the purpose of convincing the general public. But the fact remains that it had happened in the circumstances where fake news, hate speeches, and associated perhaps dramatic kind of impositions were factored and colored into the whole EndSARS arrangement.
So you don't think that most of the things that happened were real?
Well, it has been established beyond doubt, for example, inclusive of the other international international committees and associated outlets, that some of the issues that were indeed alleged to have happened had indeed not happened. You can remember very well, perhaps maybe on October 21st, 2020, a BBC documentary was, in fact, has insinuated those possibilities with particular reference to the issues associated with the killings that were said to have taken place in Lekki toll gate. So no possibility can, in all sincerity...
You don't think anybody was killed?
Well, not that I do not think, but then I can't be preemptive when indeed you have commission of inquiry taking place, put in place, when indeed you have the possibility of criminal investigations taking place. So it is too early in the day, arising from the fact that even after the inquiry that has been taking place, the possibility of criminal investigation cannot be outruled. So I wouldn't like to be preemptive, but one thing that I can say with precision is the fact that it is an issue that has generated a lot of controversies. It is an issue in respect of which you cannot rule out all possibilities, inclusive of the negative and positive possibilities, inclusive of dramatic impositions out of desire to achieve certain things. So I wouldn't like to arrive at any conclusion, taking into consideration the possibility of criminal investigation in the matter, but certainly it is a very naughty issue, as you rightly stated.
Do you fear, are you worried that the issues of human rights became a very big question on this government, especially from the international community point of view, that a lot of countries are watching? Even U.S. Secretary of State Blinken came and he was asking questions about what happened at the Lekki toll gate. Is this government taking lessons seriously, or the lesson that could be taken away seriously from that incident?
Well, in terms of human rights violation, I do not entirely and conclusively agree with you, taking into consideration what is unfolding by way of international assessment of the Nigerian situation. Let me perhaps begin by way of making reference to the Committee on the Protection of Journalists that has indeed taken out Nigeria out of impunity and violation index of recent. Through all, as far as the African countries are concerned, it is only Nigeria that has been taken off the impunity index rising from the Committee on Protection of Journalists. So if indeed the journalists, you understand, the perspectives of assessment as it relates to violations relating to journalists, Nigeria can be adjudged to be in fact and indeed as established to be off the index in terms of impunity. I think it is out of place to conclude that Nigeria is indeed prone to much human rights violations. The data out there, empirical evidence out there, is not in support of your conclusion, Sheun.
No, I'm asking the question actually because people have asked questions. International bodies, Amnesty International, even the U.S. Secretary of State have asked questions. But the question I'm asking is the lesson that have been taken away from the Lekki toll gate incident and the EndSARS report. For example, should the federal government have sent military to that scene?
Well, you see, the major function of the federal government is indeed a protection of lives and provision of security. So within the context of security, I think the bottom line is whether what has been done by the government is within the internationally tolerable limit. So it's not about the military or no military, but arising from the circumstances, the context, the factual situation on the ground, whether there is justification for what has been done to the government. And my conclusion is what government does in each and every peculiar circumstances is a function of what is on the ground.
Because the question is, the military as their role and function has captured in the Constitution of the Federal Republic. And such function includes to protect the integrity of the perimeter, and when the nation is under emergency rule or when there is need for the military intervention. But such an engagement, such as a civil engagement between the people and the government, one would think that the police has the prerogative to intervene or to take charge of that kind of situation. So a lot of us are learning lessons. The Lagos State government said it wants closure. But the question is whether or not the federal government as an entity has learned anything from that incident. Well, on how to handle its citizens in terms of protest.
Well, it is all about constitutionality, and I think what determines the constitutionality of what has been done as a factual situation on the ground, that is my response, Sheun. So you cannot rule out any possibility inclusive of bringing any security apparatus once there exists a threat to national integrity, to territorial integrity of the nation, or perhaps once there are certain security challenges on the ground. I am not a security personnel, but one thing I can tell you constitutionally, it is a function of what obtains on the ground and the discretion of the security apparatus of the government to ensure at the end of the day that you have protection, you have provided adequate protection within the limit of the Constitution. So the issue is, what are the threats on the ground, and then what is it? What measures are necessary for the purpose of ensuring that peace and security challenges that are being posed are indeed checkmated accordingly?
Honorable Minister, you are the chief law officer of the land. You advise President Buhari. You are his major legal advisor. Would you advise the president next time to send military to a protest where unarmed citizens are protesting on their rights in an open field?
Whether citizens are armed or unarmed, I am not in a position to conclude. But one thing I can tell you clearly is the responsibility of the government is to accord protection to lives and provide necessary security as far as the territorial integrity of a nation is concerned.
So my
decision, in all respect, at any time and at any, on demand, generally speaking, will be a decision that will be based on the facts on the ground. It is the facts. It's the facts on the ground that determine my line of decision to the government, with particular regard to the public interest, the interest of justice, and indeed the provision of security as far as the situation is concerned. So it is not about who is involved, but it is about what are the facts and the factual situation on the ground. My opinion as the chief law officer is to prefer a solution on the basis of the facts and circumstances on the ground, and not on the basis of perhaps individual consideration. It is about the facts that are on the ground.
In the relationship between the citizen and the government, the contract that the government signed with the Nigerian people, it does look like there was a disconnect. There were live ammunition, live rounds that were taken to that ground, which some of the reports had clearly shown. The question is that should that kind of situation, and we're looking for how to better our society, if there is any opportunities you have, Honorable Attorney General of the Federation, to change anything, would you advise the president to change any possibility of armed police officers, armed military men going into a civil situation such as the protest with ammunition or live rounds?
When you are jumping to a conclusion that live ammunition were indeed used during the EndSARS protest.
The report said so. The report said so.
Well, whether the report said so or it doesn't say so, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not in a position to ascertain. Because for whatever it is, one, you said there was a report, and arising from your submission that there was a white paper. Arising from the white paper, part of the report was rejected, part of it was admitted. Within the context of the white paper too, you have criminal investigations that must naturally follow for the purpose of criminal prosecution where the need arises. So with or without the report, what I'm trying to say in essence, the report in its own right cannot be conclusive in establishing a position. There are still additional layers of administrative processes and investigative process that may follow before, administrative and judicial processes that will follow before you can jump to a particular conclusion establishing a point, criminal or otherwise. So I think as far as the report stands in its own right, it's not conclusive of a position of what truly transpired against the background of your submission, showing that part of the report was indeed rejected by Lagos State government. And certainly there are other criminal investigative components that may, at the end of the day, translate to criminal prosecution. And as such, it is indeed premature. Indeed, very premature for you to jump to a conclusion that live ammunitions were used. I am not in a position to accept that from you, and I cannot share in your conclusion as to whether indeed knives, clubs, live ammunitions were used is premature for me as a chief law officer, as you rightly stated, for to share in your conclusion in that direction.
So let me ask, have you found, I mean, I'm not stating my own personal opinion here. I'm stating what is in the public domain, what the panel has reported. And so I'm just casting that as a question to you. Do you see any hole and opportunity for reforms in our policing or security system?
You see, change and perhaps reforms are dynamics. They are not static naturally. If you can very well recall, Sheun, in 2020, we have in place Police Act, and that was a product of change and reforms that were associated with police formation in the country for the purpose of efficiency in performance and effective performance. So outruling the possibility of change, you cannot outrule that possibility. And we have always been guided by the unfolding, perhaps, developments in the society with a view to look at the possibility of bringing about the desired change for the purpose of bringing about the desired efficiency in the development and progress of the society. So I can certainly tell you clearly that we keep learning lessons from what is unfolding in terms of positive and negative developments for the purpose of bringing about the desired amendments, for perhaps the desired reforms to our laws, so as to make them more efficient, align with the international best practices, and in ensuring that we have, at the end of the day, we have effectively addressed the challenges associated with our security architecture as far as Nigeria is concerned.
So what can you categorically tell Nigerians in respect of that? Are we supposed to, should we be expecting a dramatic reforms in the Nigerian policing system?
Well, as far as reforms in not only in the Nigeria police system is concerned, we have been making reforms by way of initiating both legislative and associated legal framework to ensure at the end of the day that we have a better society. And we can certainly not be provoked by the EndSARS report exclusively, but the general issues that are unfolding in the society. Our policy as a government is to ensure at the end of the day we have achieved some level of efficiency in general governance and administrative structure. And our resolve in that direction will not be exclusive to EndSARS agitation, but will be all-encompassing, taking into consideration all variables, inclusive of economic, security, and associated things. What drive our reform agenda is the need for efficiency of the system, and not EndSARS in exclusivity.
Okay, we'll be hoping that when the federal government gets the EndSARS report, because 14 out of those reports says that they are in the exclusive preserve of the federal government to act upon, that the Lagos State government is going to pass it on the federal government. We'll wait and we'll see what the federal government makes out of it. But let me quickly get an update from you. What is happening to the Electoral Act amendment? If you've spoken to the president, when is he assenting to it?
Well, you see, it is equally too early in the day and premature for me to arrive at any conclusion as far as the assent or no assent to electoral bill is concerned. But one thing you should know, Sheun, Mr. President has 30 days within which to take a decision on receipt of the any bill that is transmitted by the National Assembly to the presidency. But one thing I can assure you is Mr. President is desirous ever since, in respect of all policy decisions he has been making, of leaving behind a lasting legacy that will now see to the improvement and efficiency of the polity. And the electoral bill will certainly not be an exception. But one thing that you need to consider is the decision of the president is naturally a product of multi-agency, inter-ministerial, multi-agencies, and multi-departments consideration of submission with particular regard to the development of the nation. So I do not see the electoral bill to be an exception. As has been the tradition, the president will naturally factor a lot of consideration associated with security, considerations associated with economy, consideration associated with the efficiency of our democratic processes and system. So what I expect and what I am certain you will have at the end of the day is a decision that will that will factor all the associated factors, the national interest, the economic interest, the security interest, the interest of justice, and the desire to leave behind a lasting legacy. And that is what you expect arising from the decision of the president, as has been the tradition with whichever law, whichever bill that is transmitted and processed to the presidency. And I think within the regulated time frame, you will hear from Mr. President.
All right. I was going to ask you, we were due for break. I was going to ask you what you have advised the president to do, either to sign or not to.
Well, my responsibility is to factor and bring into contemplation and consideration the prevailing laws, the national interest. As you rightly know, the office of the Attorney General is always is an office that should be guided by the public interest, the interest of justice. And my decision, my recommendations and my opinion will be guided by all those considerations, the national interest, the interest of justice, public interest, economic interest of the...
And it's going to be in the positive or in the negative? We're due for a break. For the president to sign or not to sign?
Well,
are you in favor? Is it yeah or nay?
No response in whatever direction.
All right, we'll take a break. And when we return, our conversation continues with the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation. The bandits were declared terrorists. That is what the court was ruling about. The AGF went to court. What does this mean? We look at the handling of the justice system under the Buhari administration, especially with Mr. Malami as the Attorney General. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back. Thank you so much, everyone. We've been speaking with the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation and the Minister of Justice, Mr. Abubakar Malami, SCN. Thank you so much, AGF, for joining us tonight. One area that I'd like to know in the Electoral Act Amendment Bill that was passed, sent to the President, is the issue of the direct and indirect primaries. Are you for or against direct and indirect primaries?
Well, I have no decision exclusively. The office I hold, which is the office of the Attorney General of the Federation, is an office that limits my discretion. And the limitation imposed on me is that of public interest, the interest of justice, and the need to avoid the possibility of abuse of processes. So with that in mind, I will have to operate within the ascertained limits of the interest of justice, the public interest, and indeed the desire to avoid abuse. So it is not an office in respect of which I am expected to exercise personal interest or personal discretion. I will be guided by those considerations that are constitutionally enshrined in respect of which I'm expected to operate.
But of course, I mean, I'm asking you within the light of the legal debate that have been on, which do you think is legally and politically also popular with the people? Because of course you're holding a public office, which that office is also in the interest of the public. So the question is whether or not you think that within the context of our electoral system, whether you think the direct mode of primary is okay or the indirect mode of primaries. What is your legal opinion on that?
Well, the confines of a studio is not the proper venue for me to exercise a discretion as far as the national issue associated with the electoral bill, for example, is concerned. So in all sincerity, Sheun, I will not be in a position to exercise any, to profile any opinion. My responsibility is to profile an opinion in respect of same to the president, and I cannot be preemptive. I cannot share an opinion with you on this table, even before sharing same with the president. So the Constitution is clear that I will be guided by interests of justice, the public interest, and desire to displace abuse in the exercise of, in profiling an opinion, and I will do just that. But first to the president, and then second to the general public, and perhaps probably the studio, the channel's studio thereafter.
Well, the channel studio is a public place where you can also talk to Nigerians who are holding you in trust for the office that you hold tonight, because this is a public office, and you are holding it in trust in the Nigerian people. So I'm actually standing in the gap for the Nigerian people, as I'm also a constitutionally, my role in is enshrined in the Constitution to be able to hold people like you accountable to what you have said you will do to the Nigerian people.
Well,
and of course, go ahead, please.
Well, certainly I will not do so before profiling such decision to the presidency against the
So you've not spoken to the president about this?
I have not. But then I am profiling an opinion in line with the dictates of the office, which opinion I am mindful of the time frame within which it is expected to get to the president in view of the constitutional limitations of 30 days.
Okay, so let me take you up on, I'll probably allow you an opportunity of reply. The governor of Anambra State was declared by the EFCC to be on the EFCC watch list. And when we spoke with the government of Anambra State, they said, look, that you are obviously biased in the matter because you are on the Anambra governorship campaign organization, and that they feel that that is awkward. How do you react to that?
Well, my reaction to that, I'm not aware of such an appointment. It has not been communicated to me officially or unofficially. And with that in mind, I would conclude that I am not a member of any campaign council. My constitutional responsibility is established and enshrined in the Constitution. It does not include participation in political engagement of a political party, and that I will certainly not do. But as far as the Nigerian situation is concerned, I think it's common knowledge shown there are those that believe even if they wake up in the morning, the sun is not there, that Attorney General is responsible. And I think that is one of those kind of issues that you must have to live with as a public officer. But one thing I can tell you clearly, as far as the functions of institutions of government, inclusive of the security services, the law enforcement agencies, and indeed anti-corruption agencies of government are concerned, their respective responsibilities are established by the enabling laws, by the laws establishing them. So if perhaps anybody is looking at the limits of the functions, duties, and responsibilities of institutions of government, I think he should be guided by the laws governing them. So the office, the Attorney General, Abubakar Malami, honestly operates within bounds of the law, and it does not include his responsibility to remote control one agency of government or the other in the discharge of their responsibilities. If the EFCC had indeed, as claimed, I'm not in a position to confirm that or ascertain then, had indeed placed him on a watch list, certainly they must have reasons for so doing within the context of the rule established.
So you're not aware that the governor of Anambra State is on the watch list? I am in all sincerity not aware, and I don't have to be aware because the EFCC is established by law. Their responsibilities are demarcated by law, and what they do and at what point they do it are demarcated by law, and not the Attorney General or the Office of the Attorney General. No, you are the supervisory minister.
In which respect, and not in the respect of their general day-to-day anti-corruption posture and administration.
So you think that some people don't just like your face, right?
Well, the same way they don't like your face, some of them do not like your face. There could be some that may not necessarily like my face.
But if there's some people blame you for the sun not rising in the morning, it does look like some people don't like your face.
The same thing with you. Nobody has, exclusivity in terms of likeness. There are some that are out there that believe you should not be in existence as a personality, as Sheun, because perhaps maybe you engage the Attorney General this evening and, in an interview and ask him a question that they feel they do, you should not ask. And the same thing with the Office of the Attorney General. There are those people out there that believe the Attorney General is not playing or perhaps maybe doing their bit, and it is only natural.
But Attorney General, you think you are discharging your responsibility in the right way?
Well, I think I leave it to the public to assess. But one thing, I think the major basis for assessment of whether I'm doing the right thing or not is looking into the functions of the Office of the Attorney General, taking into consideration the factual situation that is on the ground to determine whether indeed there are infractions or not.
The reason why I'm asking this is Attorney Generals in this country, there's been history. That office has always been controversial. What legacy would you say you want to leave behind?
Well, the legacy I want to leave behind is the legacy of public interest as against individual interest. I don't dance to the tune of individuals, but I dance to the tune of the interest of the public. And whether I have succeeded in so doing is the only legacy I am interested in doing. Have I succeeded in establishing public interest as against individual interest? If the answer is yes, I'm satisfied, and I will be happy with that legacy.
Let me touch on that. I'd like you to quickly respond to it because I have some other issues, but a lot of lawyers who want to know what is happening to the rule of professional conduct. RPC was amended, but it wasn't accepted. We still have the 2007 from the office of Bayojo, the former Attorney General, that is still in use right now. There are disagreements in the manner in which you went about the amendment. Are you trying to fix that?
Well, in all sincerity, you see, in art of governance and administration, a lot of issues perhaps unfold, and not necessarily perhaps because they were done in the right way and manner. The Office of the Attorney General as an institution, and indeed the person of the Attorney General, Abubakar Malami, had not taken steps in the direction of consummation and conclusion of a process associated with rules of professional conduct. And when eventually the rules were said to have been amended, the Office of the Attorney General has taken steps to now cause a wholehearted investigation, and it constituted a disciplinary issue that has been considered in the Office of the Attorney General. That is the best I can tell you.
So you were not aware about the amendment?
Truly, certainly, it was not a process that was officially aligned with the tradition, conduct, and the context of the process of doing things that was consummated in line with the convention.
And people did that in your office?
Well, that possibility is not ruled out. That is why I have told you that it is indeed a disciplinary issue that is being considered, and then the committee, I think, is submitting its report over it any time from now. Well, what I'm trying to say, in essence, perhaps there could be of the scene and a third party, perhaps maybe influences that might have come to bear on certain people within the context of the Office of the Attorney General, but then I wouldn't like to be preemptive in that regard. Okay. But certainly investigation has been commissioned and is ongoing in that respect and in that direction. Let's
move fast and swiftly onto other issues. You filed a suit asking the court to declare bandits terrorists. Has that been gazetted now?
It's in the process of being gazetted, but the order has been procured and obtained, and it's been gazetted, and the publication will follow suit thereafter.
Why did it take that long, considering those who have asked for so many times, over and over, that the federal government should declare these bandits terrorists? Why did it take you that long to file that suit?
No, it has not taken long. You see, as far as insecurity is concerned, and the Nigerian context is concerned, it was a challenge that kept evolving. When it started with Boko Haram, I believe you know very well that we took immediate steps and decision to proscribe them and declare them terrorists, and that order was obtained. And then what followed thereafter in terms of Northwest challenges associated with banditry, kidnapping, and cattle rustling were all the byproduct of the Boko Haram, and they were in one way or the other interconnected. So as you are perhaps taking steps to proscribe an existing security challenge, new security challenges are evolving. And again, when eventually we equally had issues associated with IPOP, we equally took decision to have them proscribed. So these are evolving challenges, and as they evolve in line and in tune with our tradition of facing the challenges and taking actions over them, we have taken steps. So it's not that it has taken so long, but then we kept working and we kept addressing the challenges as they arise, as they manifest, and as they unfold.
So how do we then qualify the bandits now?
Terrorists, within the context of the order granted by the court.
Officially, even without a gazette?
With or without the gazette is a process. I mean, it's a formal process, and it doesn't take away the legality and the effectiveness of an order or perhaps the decision of the court. The decision of the court is effective, simpliciter, and inherently in its own right, without necessarily awaiting the gazetting process. But the gazetting process is part of the process associated with formality of it. So in effect, with the pronouncement of the court, the incidence of effect associated with the judgment had taken automatic effect.
So they are to be treated like terrorists now?
No doubt about that.
And the military have that information, the police have the information?
Everybody had the information, and then the necessary publication of the gazette will follow, will come up very soon. So everybody is on notice, and the formations are accordingly notified.
So which group falls under that category of bandits? How do you identify them?
Well, identification of bandits first and foremost is the fact that they bear arms, and bearing arms, they constitute and pose challenges to the national security, inclusive of the security of the Nigerian citizens. So bearing arms is a component of it, and then perhaps using the arms to now cause havoc, to now a kind of force security challenge to the national territorial integrity of the nation, among others.
Because you see the bandits involving in kidnapping, involving in cattle rustling, involving in invasion, involving in so many nefarious activities. So there are segments of them who do not kidnap. There are segments of them who do not do cattle rustling.
But
so the question is that, how do you, for the security operatives, are there guidelines on how to identify them, or anybody that is seen as bandits is prosecuted or is being treated in the arms way?
Well, engagement in the use of arms and force, and perhaps forcing a security challenge, you understand, with a view to perpetrate kidnapping, insurgency, and associated things are the major components of it. So bearing arms, making life miserable for the Nigerian citizen in a circumstances whereby you are posing a challenge to the national security of the nation constitute a serious threat to the well-being of the nation, to the territory of the nation, and it has to be checked. And it is in line with that the court had made pronouncement, and then will be guided by the pronouncement of the court accordingly.
There are always kidnapping here and there. If they kidnap, what is the policy of the federal government on issues of negotiation for ransom or to release Nigerians?
If you kidnap using force, using arms, you have qualified as a terrorist within the dictates and determination of the judicial decision handed down by the court, and then you are indeed, accordingly, you have come within the purview and ambit of the Terrorism Act, and then you will be accordingly and decisively dealt with accordingly.
How do you place Boko Haram?
Boko Haram has been proscribed long before now, and they have been declared terrorists, and that is the more reason why they are promptly being engaged by the military in terms of ensuring their elimination, in line and in tune with the international best practices. And what the bandits have succeeded in doing now is to have themselves accommodated within that context of what has been prevailing in the way and manner the Boko Haram were being dealt with.
But you wonder that the federal government is giving amnesty to some repentant Boko Haram. So tomorrow, if the bandits who have been declared terrorists to decide to say they are repentant, would the federal government also give them amnesty?
Amnesty is a different thing altogether, and it's not inherent, you understand, in the declaration, in the terrorism kind of a thing. So amnesty is indeed, it stands on its own. It is in no way automatically built into the banditry and associated terrorism declaration process.
So the question is that anyone who is a bandit is that window of being repentant, open? Is the federal government looking in that respect?
Well, no decision has been taken in that direction, but one decision that has been taken is the declaration of bandits, declaration of bandits as terrorists, and they will be accordingly dealt with for now. The idea of window or no window has not been, it's not an issue that has been discussed, deliberated, and agreed upon. As far as we are concerned, they have now been declared terrorists, and they will be accordingly decisively and ruthlessly dealt with accordingly.
What is the update on the Justice Mary Odili house invasion?
Well, it was indeed an unfortunate incident, and arising from the fact that the federal government or any of its institutions is not in any way involved. We have commissioned investigation by the police, and the police have done investigation arising therefrom, and prosecution is being considered accordingly.
So have they transferred some of these issues to your office?
A report has been received by the Office of the Attorney General arising from the investigation carried out and conducted by the Office of the Inspector General of Police, and then we'll do the needful accordingly.
What do we know from your office based on that report?
Well, the report is clear that it is indeed an organized crime syndicate that had operated, and then they will be dealt with accordingly.
So what more do we know on that report? What more can you tell Nigerians?
Well, fundamentally, just like any other organized crime that has been existing in the system, one thing that the public needs to know is there are indeed in place a syndicate that are engaged, that have engaged themselves in an organized crime, and they have been identified, investigation has been concluded, and they will be accordingly prosecuted.
I was going to ask the question about Sheikh Gumi, when I left that out. Is someone who has related closely with the bandits, gone with them taking, trying to, be an intermediary. How do you see Sheikh Gumi and his activities with the bandits?
Well, I have no opinion over that, but one thing is we have not engaged with Sheikh Gumi officially, and until it comes to me as an official matter, I will not be in a position to comment one way or the other. But certainly, as far as our security architectural arrangement associated with declaration of bandits as terrorists is concerned, we have done the needful. We have procured a court order, a court judgment in that respect. They have been declared terrorists, and will continue to treat them as terrorists without any third-party consideration. Our decision as to how best to deal with them or not to deal with them will not in any way be influenced by what Dr. Gumi is doing. Our decision will be guided exclusively by the judicial fundamentals, by the security operational principles aligned with the international best practices.
I have two quick questions, and we have just about 2 minutes or less to go. Some leaders in the Southeast met with President Buhari at a villa, and some of the question as to whether or not Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, might be accorded some kind of amnesty or might be pardoned in the case that was taken to court. Is your office thinking in that regard? Have you spoken to the president of the possibility?
Well, pardon is a function of conviction in the Nigerian context, and as far as I know, Nnamdi Kanu has not been convicted yet. So the idea of pardoning him is premature. Again, the background of the fact that he has not yet been, trials associated with him have not been concluded. But one thing that I can tell you clearly, that he is studying trial, and the trials continue as of today.
So there is no possibility of a political out-of-court solution?
I am not ruling out any possibility, but that is not immediately on table.
Is it possible?
I cannot tell you with precision.
Do you think that could be a solution to douse the tension in the region?
I have not assessed the security implication of that in terms of being a solution or a problem.
You are a humanist in some sense, because law also has some level of humanity. Is it something you as a person in your own office and your own authority could consider to douse the tension in that region? As
a human, and indeed the Attorney General of the Federation, my reasoning, my thinking and my thoughts are regulated by the public interest. So it is the public interest that will regulate, that will guide, and that will influence my decision one way or the other as to the possibility of accommodating the out-of-court settlement or otherwise. But certainly, one thing I can tell you clearly, the issue of perhaps pardon or perhaps associated settlement is not right on table. It's a bridge that I always enjoy crossing when I get to it. I have unfortunately not got it.
Will you be willing to cross it?
Well, it depends on how deep I find the waters at the bottom when I get to the bridge.
All right, finally, and just quickly too, you've talked about terror, those who are funding terror. Up till now, we've not heard anything about them. Who are these people? Why is the government reluctant in naming these people?
You see, one thing that I think you need to take into consideration is the fact that investigation is ongoing, and with the fact that a lot of arrests were made, with the fact that investigation is ongoing, with the fact that judicial orders for detention of those that have been arrested are obtained, I think it is indeed out of place to conclude that nothing is being had. Work is in progress. It will continue to be in progress, and then certainly we will do the needful at the right time. You have just stated, as it relates to the order that has been obtained proscribing and indeed declaring bandits terrorists, that it has taken too long. The fact remains that we have ever been working. There was no dull moment as far as the process is concerned. So what I'm saying in essence is a work in progress. Arrests were made, judicial orders were obtained, and indeed we will do the needful at the appropriate time.
Are there big names that are involved?
Well, names could be big and small.
Are they politically exposed persons?
Politically exposed, institutionally exposed, institutionally engaged, a lot of them.
And of international dimension too?
Local and international, and certainly we'll do the needful at the appropriate time, and in line with our tradition as it relates to prosecution will spare no one will be spared as far as we are concerned as a government.
Honorable Attorney General of the Federation, so much to talk about, but well, that's how much time can permit us. But thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you, Shehu.
Mr. Abubakar Malami, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, the Attorney General of the Federation, and the Minister of Justice. Thank you indeed for your time today. But that's our program for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Shehu Okimale. Bye for now.